We have audio. I will start the video in just a moment. And here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Got enough from Dennis that he's going to be running till about 8 p.m. Tom Peterson's running tonight. I was texting Rachel earlier about, attending. It seemed like she was going to, but she's just later tomorrow. Wow. She's getting waiting to be let in. Rachel will be Rachel up there joining. Right.
Right. So for those of you joining us in the room, the speaker is up here and I will have video which will move in this direction. When you come up to present, please use the table in the front. Yeah. So Rachel, do we have it? I think everybody's in. Who's here?
Possibly get Rachel on screen. I guess she's the lead.
I will add Rachel. There she is.
She is not using her video. That's why I wasn't before. But there she is. All right.
Okay.
Are we ready to roll?
We are ready.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody. This is for joining us. This is the new Planning Board meeting of July 5th, 22. We have some administrative business before us, public comments, public hearing, and then we have a number of applications that will be before us. In fact, we have 7 applications that are before us. So, with that in mind, let's get started. And the first thing we're going to do is look at the minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to look at the minutes? I know that you weren't part of it. Rachel, did you get a chance to look at the minutes?
Here she is.
Hey, Rachel, did you get a chance? Unmute yourself. Did you get a chance to look at the minutes of the meeting? I need to unmute yourself. Unmute. There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Did you get a chance to look at the, actually, there's only 2 people here, so we really don't have a forum to vote on that.
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah. All right. So, Rachel, did you get a chance to look at the minutes of the meeting?
No, I'll look at them real quick.
Okay. Why don't we give that a moment? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you want to wait until, because it was kind of
We'll wait till the
lengthy,
end of
so.
it, yeah. That way we'll have some other people there too. So we're going to move then to our Village Board and Ulster County Planning Board updates. Will Murray, are you available?
I am. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to our meeting tonight. Just no updates since our last meeting earlier in June. Ulster County Planning Board meets tomorrow, so no real updates.
Okay. Do you have anything from the Environmental Policy Board? Will, do you have anything from the Environmental Policy Board?
I'm not on that board. I'm sorry, I don't have anything.
Rachel.
I went to the meeting. There didn't appear to be much interest in planning board related activity. There was some discussion of the garden. That's about it.
Fair enough, thank you. So we're going to move on now to the public comment. Are there any people here that are to speak to general public comments on applications or issues for the board? Is there anyone in the waiting room? No?
No.
Okay, so there will be no public comments for this evening. So now we're going to move on to the public hearing. First public hearing we have tonight, a special use permit PB 2207 for 1-3 Platicable Avenue. The applicant is Nasib Chowdhury. District is B2. So what we're going to do then is ask for a motion to open the public hearing. No motion. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak to the special use permit for 1-3 Platicable Avenue?
Good evening. Joseph Manette on the architecture of the project.
Yes, you want to, we have an application review for these folks. So this is primarily for members of the public that would have any sort of comment or issue related to that. While yours is business, I'm going to have to ask you to wait a little bit longer and we'll get down to the business aspect of it. Is that okay? Yes. So seeing that there is no one here to speak to,
There's one person back there.
I can't see the hand. Yeah. So come on up.
Where am I going?
Generally it would be right where this gentleman is seated, so he's going to move and you go right ahead. So this is a public hearing for the special use permit PB 2207, 1-3 Platicable Avenue. So please go ahead if you want to state your name.
Thank you. My name is John Oleson, and I'm happy I came tonight. Like I said, no one else made any comments about this at all. And so I get it. Anyway, so I got two broad kind of things I wanted to talk to the board about. The first is just to make sure that you're aware of the economics and nature of the vape market in New York right now, and the market for these stores, and what the presumptive purpose of this store is. So vape stores are actually a dying business. The state has regulated out of existence the flavored vapes and jewels. So these businesses aren't actually going to be very profitable for long, but they're doing boom times right now because in the space between when cannabis has become legal, recreational cannabis has become legal, and there are open dispensaries throughout the state, especially downstate, but even cities around us, most of the vape stores now sell cannabis cartridges under the counter. These are tax-free, they're making lots of money on it. They're in a gap in the market where the police are not enforcing any cannabis crimes right now. The state doesn't have a regulatory apparatus to go after vape stores that are selling these. So now everyone's doing it and making lots of money from it. And it's a very short time it's going to work, and only until the dispensaries are open near the end of the year or the beginning of next year. But in that gap, the vape stores are selling many of these cartridges that purport to come from California, other places where it's regulated, and so people think they're buying. But they're not. There's no guarantees, there's no supervision, no regulation, but it is now dominating the vape store business in this state. You go into a vape store, Pepsi, Newport, whatever, they're right there. You just ask when you get them, $40, $50 a cartridge. That is now this kind of last gasp boom. Okay, now I hear, should we presume these people are a risk for that? And so should you hold on and ask more questions? Yes, okay, you should here because of the particulars of the situation. If you read that paper they put in for you, saying what the purpose of the store was, I'm sorry, it's not very believable. Talk about selling water, okay? We have two very good head shops on Main Street already that sell high quality pipes and bongs, if people want to buy those things in a discreet way as part of other businesses that are successful, long, local run businesses on Main Street. We have no more need for that. Our gas stations, though, all sell all the vaping equipment. They all sell bongs and pipes too. So there's no doubt we have plenty of supply in the village for this right now. So how are they going to make money? Okay, there's a way. Now, the longtime stores in our village have refused, my understanding at least is, have refused to risk it by risking their long-time businesses. And so it's really these fly-by-night vape shops that are doing the business I'm talking about. Now, this business in particular. I read the paperwork here. And then they say they have a vape shop in New York City. I couldn't find any record of that. Okay, if they tell you the name of it, you could look up to see if they have any violations in New York City or in New York State. But they don't name any of the other vape businesses they say they're in. Okay, but this applicant, or sorry, there is a vape license now for this address, one Plattekill, even though they don't have a business yet. They already got the license. Okay, and they're trying to open one at Plattekill also, and there's one in Newburgh that's operating. So the operating one that's under the same name is operating on Broadway in Newburgh. They operate a big vape store there. I don't know, can't prove what they sell there, but they have a big vape store there. It's what is it? Pass? What is it? What's the name of the store? Puff, don't pass. So they have they incorporated first PPDP Corp with the name of the person on your application there. Then for some reason they didn't use that, and they incorporated PPDP Inc. with someone else in his family, and that's number one of that, and that's the one in Newburgh. PPDP2 is the one that's here, and PPDP3 is the one that's supposed to be in Plattekill. They're suddenly opening up new vape shops in a market where the market for legitimate vapes is dying. They're being banned from the market. Selling water on Main Street is going to be, no. This is a short-term, get money now operation that is going to damage other businesses and legitimate businesses in town, okay? Because yeah, if people can go and buy a bong, or our tourists for the next 6 months can buy a bong on Main Street, and they can also buy a THC cartridge on the counter from a store, they're going to go there. And all of the legitimate business that goes with it, that our town benefits from, will go to these people, not from here, who presumably are here for a quick strike to make money on very 6-month period where vape stores will still have a business in New York State. I don't, I understand people are going to say, hey, you can't assume that. I'm not assuming, I don't have proof. I'm just saying there are risks here. You need to ask more questions. The name of these companies that have the licenses already, presuming that they're going to sell vapes in this town, they haven't, that's not on the application. There's no names of the corporate entities. You've got the owner of this building saying my agent is this person, and then the business names, the email names, the phone numbers on that application are not in any way connected to the business that actually has the license to sell the vapes. There's going to be the tenant. And I think the board should be very skeptical, not just here, but in all of these commercial, applications on Main Street. Be careful and ask questions, please, about these LLCs, these corporate entities, that who are these tenants? Because if they, have problems, they're not going to, you can't count on being able to get these people for taxes or get these people for liability if they hurt someone, for example, with a vape or cannabis that's laced with something. This is not part of the regulated market if something like that would happen. So I urge the board to be much more careful about these things and to ask lots of questions about the corporate entities. Who owns these? Do they own other vape businesses? Can you give us a clean bill of health for those vape businesses from the places where they are, that we know the cops haven't been called to their vape store, et cetera, et cetera. There are questions to be asked here, and I urge them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to the special use permit? I'm hearing, seeing none. Like to get a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So the public hearing for special use permit PB 2207 is now closed. So we are now coming up for the application review for special use permit for the commercial retail other smoke shop PB 2207 at 13 Plattekill. The applicant is Nancy Chaudhary. As we are aware, this is the application for special use permit to establish a 450 square foot retail smoke shop used in vacant commercial space on Plattekill business district. This use is a retail business, not otherwise mentioned. We held a public hearing tonight. So the next part is we need to look at the signage. We were supposed to receive a note back from Corey regarding the sign. Did we receive that yet today, Autumn?
No.
Okay.
He did make a note in his previous comment about this that I saw after our last meeting, but I was gonna bring that up.
Let me see what I've got on the sign. The comment that Corey made previously about the signage.
This is memo in October.
The memo from the 7th of June states, I'm in receipt of the sign plan submitted with the planning board application 2207. This letter is to serve as official notice to the board and applicant that our office is actively reviewing the plan for compliance with all appropriate laws. We know that there are additional regulations that may apply due to the nature of the business proposed being a smoke shop, and will be following all Food and Drug Administration requirements associated with the same. Additionally, in a continuing effort to preserve the historic nature of our downtown business district, we always consult with the most current Village of New Paltz comprehensive master plan when dealing with the aesthetics of all signage. Thank you for your patience as we continue this review. What we have.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
So we really don't have a final note from him on that, on the sign. We do need to have that before we really do much more than we have. That is kind of the last thing that we're waiting on in terms of compliance. If the gentleman who's represented would like to come forward, then feel free to come on up and we can hold a discussion.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Joseph Minuta with Minuta Architecture in Windsor, New York, and I'm here to represent the project this evening. I see that we've had the public hearing and closed the public hearing. It's a pretty straightforward project as far as I can tell. We have an existing space, it's 450 square feet. It was previously used as retail. Obviously, this is a different sort of retail use. At this point, the building inspector has taken a look at it. My clients came to me after the fact, everything was filled out, casework, et cetera. Pretty much just display cases in the room. There's a few things that I added to the plans just for some safety and ADA compliance. And we're here tonight hoping for a approval of this project.
It has been a few months, and that's unfortunately how things are running at the moment. We do see the application. I do see the plans. I do see the material that you have on the board here, as well as the view down the street. We have to wait until we get the work from our building inspector, our code enforcement officer regarding the signs, and they need to sign off on it and give us their approval before we can issue any sort of approval to move forward. It's really unfortunate that we can't do that tonight, but we just don't have the information back with it. So that's limiting us in what we can do. We're just gonna have obviously, unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait until we get back from them to move forward on it.
May I ask for conditional approval based on the building inspector's review of that? If it's satisfactory, then move forward. If it's not satisfactory, obviously it will be changed to whatever the regulations are.
Actually,
So the signage, it's to be approved as part of the site plan, so it's not something that could be done conditionally. You would just have to come back to have another review. And based on the fact that the board was waiting for the building inspector's memo on this, I don't have the resolution prepared for this evening, so.
It's very disappointing.
yes.
Okay, I guess it is what it is, and we're gonna have to wait till the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll have the next meeting very soon.
And I think if there's any issue noted by the building inspector's review, then that'll be brought to your attention. That way you could resolve it before.
I would appreciate that, the opportunity to make that resolution and get it in time. I don't know if we start a 10-day period before the meeting happens, but I would like to be able to make whatever changes, modifications are needed so that when we come here, we are here to result.
Okay. Autumn, if you can just make a note saying that we're waiting on this to move forward with the applicant. And get a note back with him as soon as possible. And get that note that if there are any outstanding issues that need to be resolved, we'll have him communicate those to you directly. That way, there won't be any interpretation of language, it'll be direct from him to you. And hopefully, we'll be able to get this all tied up and resolved before you meet this in our next meeting.
I do have a question. The comments from the building inspector, was I CC'd on that? I didn't see anything today.
That was in a very old email going back to the beginning. I thought we, from June 7th.
June 7th.
Yeah, I believe that was forwarded earlier, is rather open-ended statement. I did have a question though, because that has just checking to see if your office has forwarded the affidavit for the posting, for the public notice posting.
Yes, we had that. We mailed all of them.
Okay,
and,
great. I
we
just
did
haven't
have
gotten
one
that.
come back, which I
Okay.
don't think would be appropriate.
Uh,
I mean, that
sure, I
you
can
can hear,
take it.
whether I can hand that back to you and let you know that it got sent.
All right, that's great. I can take that for you.
Well,
Um,
may I approach?
Sure. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you very much.
Didn't get the affidavit back yet, so I was waiting on that. Thank you.
Should I admit the people that are waiting?
Yeah, I'll bring them in. Thanks. Think you got them.
Yeah, I mean, so like to say, I am, curious about some of the information that Mr. Lesky brought up, and I think we should ask the applicant for more details on the corporate tenant, and, what their other businesses are, and, I'm planning on intending to sell these teams and structures, and we'll see, what we can do about that.
Okay, you're representing the gentleman here. So questions came up from the public comment regarding the sale of THC cartridges. I'm also interested in the other corporate entities that they have that are associated with this. And so Zach, here, why don't you just be a little more specific with it, perhaps you get that information.
Well, since I'm not part of the corporation, let me bring Mr. Signage up. Is that okay? Thank you. Mr. Good evening, board.
Good evening, gentlemen, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So the first question would be the corporation. I'm assuming PPDP1 is owned by his father, Shahada Chaudhry, and the PPDP2 is owned by me. I am the president, and that's the vice president, and PPDP3, I am the president, and he's the vice president.
We have all three licenses, as the gentleman mentioned on the public comment. We, he don't know if we have our licenses. We have all four licenses that you need to operate a retail smoke shop in the state of New York. We could email it to you guys as we speak.
And the first time when we here, we mentioned on social media, you can look at all our different locations. It has the addresses and everything is all in there. We do not intend to sell any THC products. Only thing we're operating and the reason we're able to expand is because we're following the law and we're going by the rules. If we wasn't doing that, our location would have been shut down. We already been in business for 2 years plus. Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I think just having a list of all those locations and, the details. Like you said,
Anything else you guys like to know? I'm the president. You can ask me while I'm here.
Well,
So they don't get delayed any longer.
no, we understand, and we appreciate that. If you can tonight, you can send that information to Autumn, planning and zoning at, you get it to, so they have.
Planning zoning at villageofnewpaltz.org.
I believe that was the
You have
thing,
the-
that was the
yeah.
first thing we sent
We have-
to you
we
guys.
have
We already
the
sent our plan and what would we be doing in our business. We already sent
Right,
it. That was the
and
first
I
thing.
remember hearing you, you were talking about the different items you're gonna have, including, I believe there was actually a beverage that you were speaking of as well.
Beverages, exotic and flavors that are not common. It was just that it came out improper. I believe people had a different understanding of it. It's just basically a Fanta drink. It's hard to find a strawberry flavor on it in the United States. So we get it imported and sell it. That's where we attract our customers. That's what makes us better than every other business. That's the reason that allows us to expand, because we don't only target one type of clientele. We're gonna keep cigars. So you can say we got the elderly, because the youth doesn't really smoke that. Let's be fair. Exotic drinks, exotic chips, the new trendy stuff, the kids that could post, they come to those 21 and plus. And all our location, you'll see our license on display. These gas stations, they actually do not have licenses. Since we're on that topic, I would like to mention, if you guys could look into that, in order to sell a vape, you have to get a special license. You can't just sell it. To sell CBD, the law took effect last month of 25th. A lot of places still have that, but they're not allowed to. Even in this neighborhood, you can check. So all those little things, since we're on it, I would like, if you guys could do anything, I don't know if that's your thing or not, to look into it.
It's not for this board, if it's an enforcement issue, whether the building department or the.
I just wanted to mention it because I go to multiple gas stations. Obviously everybody here goes. You will see that they have all this waste and all this product. I look, and as a business owner, my job immediately I look to see, if they're following all the protocols, because the ins and outs. And I see 90% of gas stations don't have any of those licenses on display. That alone is a health and violation.
Well, here's what the function of the planning board is, just so that we can be clear here. And our charge is to make sure that the applicant complies with the codes that are part of our city government. And there's a number of codes that say what you can and cannot do in terms of building it, some related to operations. But that's really what we do. We don't make any judgment calls on things, nor do we say that enforcement needs to be done somewhere else. If there is an enforcement issue, that's handled by the appropriate department in the city government.
The reason I was making, I just wanted to clear that air.
We understand.
And obviously, as you can see, we've been here for 6 months plus already. We're just trying to follow all the protocols, all the A's and B's that you guys have been presenting to us, so we can follow all of those and get the position open.
As soon as we get the reading back from the code enforcement officer, and if you could please send some information regarding corporations to our project coordinator here, then we can look at it and hopefully by this time at our next meeting, we'll have things ironed out and be ready to either approve or disapprove based upon the information we get.
Okay, sure. If I may, I obviously the clients are very forthcoming, willing to do whatever's asked. I just question the relevance of that. They were a single shop. I don't, if this was their first shop, how does their business, this is a question, how does their business relate to the planning board and what we're here to do, the charges here?
What they sell or don't sell, we have no interest. What we look for is to ensure that as part of the community character aspect of our relevance, that they are indeed, if they're new businesses and they're unusual to our area, that they are safe businesses and that they comply with all of the development regulations where they currently exist, which gives us the assurance, hopefully, that they will be safe in this location.
I understand. I can appreciate that. Thank you.
And for instance, we have some other retail businesses that are coming in that are new to us and our environment, and completely new types of businesses for the village, and we want to ensure that the people who are operating them are of the ability and standards that are required, and that if they have any other business that is similar, we would want to look and make sure that those businesses would be in fitting with the community character that we have here. It's just all we're trying to do.
Okay, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. So if you can get that information to us tonight, she can get that information to the building inspector, the code enforcement officer tomorrow. So hopefully, if there's any problem by tomorrow afternoon, you can be aware of it and able to cure it before we have the deadline for our next meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll get that to you. I do have one other question. I guess I'm a little, sorry, I can't put the dates here. But the June 7th letter, we had responded and provided documentation with regard to signage since then. My recollection, just kind of curious as to if nothing's been.
Don't know. I haven't seen it.
Nothing's ever reviewed since. Or
No. No.
I believe that they've been reviewing with the village attorney as well, the considerations about the FDA regulations, et cetera, that was noted in that previous memo from the building inspector, but he has not sent forth a final memo, so sorry about
Any other items that you would like us to do or?
No, that's it. This should be fairly simple.
Thank you so much.
We just want to kind of help you to get to a point where you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just on the side note, Dennis has asked for a link so that he can join us. I don't know if he is in the way you're going to get the nature. So if we can get that going, that would be. Okay, so now we are going to go to our second site plan review, PB 2202-218 Main Street, Charlotte, Guernsey. Application for site plan approval, expand existing general professional office building, and add new handicap accessible ramp. We do have a draft resolution of approval. Did you put those out there on the table here?
Yeah, there, those over
And then they've got buried. So you have come to us and we've gone through the, we've gone through all of the things we need to go through, reviews, information, data, things of that nature. And so finally we have come now to the resolution of approval. So it's pretty much a boilerplate. There's an application summary, there's an identification of the property. Talked about the plans in the middle when we received them. Gives kind of a procedural history of what occurred, including when the public hearing was. Talks about the different aspects of it, and then it gets to the findings. And the findings simply talk about that the site plan conforms with the village's adopted comprehensive master plan and village code for the B2 district. Make certain findings, including streetscape standards, conditions that do not permit safe or strict compliance with the requirement for a stub connection to access future parking in adjacent lots because the subject property sits much lower geographically than the adjoining lots. Talks about the interior parking lot, exterior parking lot, and the discussion we had about the street furniture and public waste receptacles that are not necessary under the village code. So finally, we get to the resolution of approval, which we say we are going to approve this only in strict accordance with all the terms and conditions of the resolution of approval. And they include specific conditions prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall demonstrate compliance with the 2020 Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State to the satisfaction of the building inspector. Required landscaping shall be permanently maintained in a healthy growing condition at all times. It also says the property owner is responsible for regular maintenance while planting as necessary for each particular plant species, and the lighting level shall not exceed the Illuminating Engineering Society Outdoor Site International Black Sky Association area recommendation. So then we get to the general conditions saying that it's conditioned upon the applicant submitting all the necessary final copies of the plans, reports, and documents. Further condition upon all approvals that are needed for operation by federal, state, or local laws. The site approval, the site plan as approved by the planning shall be binding upon the applicant and any subsequent owner, and any changes from the approved plan shall require resubmission and reapproval by the planning board. If no construction or other site improvements have been initiated at the site during the 12-month period following the site plan approval, the approved plan shall require resubmission and reapproval by the planning board, and that all fees regarding this application must be paid in full, and any bonds necessary for the performance of the work shall be in a form such amount as required by the village board of trustees. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion for approval of this site plan for 218 Main Street. And then we are going to need to take a second, and then we will do a voice vote. And so need a motion to approve the site plan for 218 Main Street, PB 2202.
So motion.
Second,
Second.
All in favor? Well, now we're going to go and get a voice vote by person. So Autumn, if you would go right ahead.
Rick Soto.
Am I, if I was not here for the review of this, I'm still able to vote?
If you're comfortable that you've gotten up to speed on the application, then you are able to vote. There's,
No.
Rachel's here.
Rachel's here
no,
now.
so if you're more comfortable to abstain, then that would be,
Abstain and see.
Okay, that's fine.
Zach Bielecki,
Aye.
Rachel Lagadka.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair John Litton.
Aye.
I think we have Dennis for Tom, but that's three.
oh, no, that's the other Dennis, sorry.
Yeah, that's the other Dennis.
So the motion has approved. Appreciate this. This will be signed. Do we want me to sign this particular copy? Yep, pen handy. I think I'll probably do it in my briefcase. Well, perfectly not one. Thank you. There we go.
Okay. Great, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In favor, before, yeah.
Okay, so the next item on tap is site plan amendment PB 2120, 107 Main Street, applicant for Lemon Squeeze, and zoning district of B2. Anybody here representing Lemon Squeeze?
Hi, I'm here.
There you go.
Hi. Alan Ross intended to be there in person this evening, but he had a family emergency, so I'm going to be joining remote.
Okay, let's just kind of run over very quickly. I think we all have a summary of this. The board classified this as a type 2 action at our 12/21 meeting. Not exempt from referral under the agreement with the Ulster County Planning Board. Previously advised that the Ulster County Planning Board gave a decision of no county impact. Do we have to resubmit this, Ashley?
You don't have to resubmit it, but I just want to confirm that the village has a copy of that referral response in the record before you.
Okay. We held a public hearing on the 18th of January. So what we'll need to do is we're going to need to look at the revisions to the plans, review and discuss some of the Historic Preservation Committee comments, and then discuss the lighting on this, and then discuss the landscaping. So why don't you lead us through what your revisions are and why you want them to have these revisions?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So I can share my screen if that's helpful in any way to look at the drawing.
That would be,
Should I do that?
Yes.
yeah.
Great, okay. Screen share, this one. So there are 3 drawings that were submitted, revised, that define the scope of the changes. And we summarized them in this little note box up here. So I'll just go through those quickly and then I can take you through those revisions. We revised the front terrace size and dimension string. We added cantilevered wood planting boxes at the west side of the rear deck, removed the arborvitae from the west side of the rear deck. So the cantilevered wood planting boxes were added in lieu of the arborvitae. We added specimen notes at the north side of deck regarding specimen trees on the back of the property. Updated the planting schedule to reflect those specimen tree changes. And it says revised patio dimensions. Actually, that's really redundant to the first note. It's the same area, some showing those dimension changes. There's also a minor change to some of the finishes on the east side of the building, which I'll take you through. So you can see here, we updated the basic change is that there used to be the original design, there was a row of arborvitae that would create a screen here between this residential or apartment building and the new back deck. And there's concern, once we really saw how everything laid out there, that those arborvitae may not get really enough sun to be viable. This is the north side of the building, and there's quite a lot of shadow that gets cast into that back north area between our building and the neighboring building. So the solution is to build a planting bed, a raised planting bed that hangs off or cantilevers off the bench along that west side, getting the plants much higher off the ground, even up above the deck level, and having smaller boxwoods that could essentially perform the same task as creating a screen, a nice green screen, but be more viable. So that's the idea. And one other change, sorry, I'm zooming around a lot, was to use some specimen trees on the back of the north side. It would be able to be viewed from the deck looking toward that north side. So we updated this schedule to indicate those trees. You can see here, there's the pink dogwood was added, the green velvet boxwood, that's along that screen off the deck. You see here also the rose shell azalea, the pink crepe myrtle, and lastly, the spring snow crab apple. So those are the types of trees that we plan to put in that backyard along the back of the deck. Let's see, next. You can also see here, there was a slight change to the size of the front terrace here. It was extended to the west by a little bit. The old dimension was 13'9", and it's grown to 14'4", essentially so that the building or the deck itself could connect to the outer corner of the building. Previous design, wall was held in closer, and the low wall that we have coming across here on the west end of the terrace was actually conflicting with the windows that are there because the windows are very low. So we decided to push that line over a little bit to just line it up with the corner pilaster or corner of the building there. So I'll show you that in the elevation in a moment. It's all still as of right within the setbacks. And here's the note calling out the assorted specimen trees along the back. And you can see here that row of boxwoods off the cantilevered planting bed. I'm going to skip this and come back to this so we can kind of stay on point here. So you see here, revision in the front of the building. There was a minor design change made to the entry arch. The previous one, if you remember, had an arc, sort of an arch that you walk through. Now it's flat, so it was a minor change there. And this is the area where it was expanded. So the wall used to end here, but as that wall runs back toward the building, it was conflicting with those end windows. So we're asking to push that out to the outer corner of the building so that that little stone wall can resolve nicely against the building. And also, you can see here on the west elevation that this shows the cantilevered pergola. So there's sort of a heavier line here. The lower part of the siding here is back at the bench level, and then sticking out from that, hanging out about 2 feet, is the cantilevered planting bed there. And below, we intend to put some lattice just to create a nice screen down there. So when there's some storage down there, no one has to really see it. But there's really not much of a view that anyone would see from there anyway. And on the back of the building, you can see there was similar lattice screen to just cover up any storage. And you can see here at the upper level, we're just showing a lattice, more of an open lattice screen with these little viewing type windows on the back. I know that the Historic Preservation Commission did have some comments on that. There was some sort of back and forth and discussion about that. And we're in the process of revising the design. But they didn't have any objections. They just had some comments and recommendations. And you can see here the side view of that cantilevered planting bed with the plants, our boxwoods growing out of them. On the east elevation, change here was made just expanding the stone rather than wood siding. So we had wood siding along the back here at the mechanical screen and also around the storage shed area. And we're proposing to change that all to a stone veneer. We just think it looks nicer, something the client wanted to put a little more effort into and make it look a little bit nicer on the back. So that's the idea there. I'll back up now to the lighting. The only revision to the lighting here you'll see is the addition of some step lights on the back here. So these are low lights that run up along the steps. These are the stairs that go into the kitchen, and then these are the stairs that lead up to the parking area. The two separate stairs are more of a public stair. It also goes to a bathroom, exterior bathroom here, and the server stair on the south side of that. And this is the light that we're proposing to use. It's a surface mounted, semi-recessed really, LED light that just one occurs at each step. This goes up. They're very minimal. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but they're just small little LEDs. I think they won't cause any kind of glare or any issues with lighting in terms of glare. And that's really the summary of everything that we're asking to change.
Any questions by any member of the board?
Yeah, if I could ask, and I'll preface with reminding everyone that I'm new. This is my first meeting back. I had been on the board some time ago, but my first meeting back, so I haven't seen this project until now. So, John, I hope you'll, give me some feedback. Maybe tonight it's been discussed extensively, but the rear deck of the building. What is going to be the intended usage of that? And has there already been a discussion about noise or screening for the activities on the rear deck?
There certainly was a discussion about that. It was one of the primary concerns in the initial review, along with lighting back there. So that's why I was mentioning this notion of controlling the glare. The deck will be a dining area. It'll be in operation when the dining room is open. The occupancy of it will close when the kitchen closes, so it will not be a drinking area. There's also no serving of alcohol directly on that deck, meaning there's no bar outside. If you're ordering any kind of drinks with your meal, you can order them, they'll come from inside at the bar. So that's really the main intended use of it. There are benches that go around the outer edge, and then there's a series of tables and a couple of fire pits that will be set on the deck itself. There's pergola above that. There'll be some outdoor heaters there. There'll be some outdoor speakers that will play music low, some sort of ambient music there. And that's the basic intended use of the deck.
And presuming there'd be music inside, is there a door that would be closed with service just passing through and closing it? Or would the deck be, of a listening volume for the music that might be happening inside?
No, it's really two separate areas. This is the base plan here. So the main street is here on the bottom of the image, and there's the small patio on the front. This hatched area just shows the area of addition that was already approved and constructed. So there's a vestibule that leads into the main dining space here. And then you'll see there's a short run of stair that leads to a mezzanine level. At that mezzanine level is where there will be intended to be the piano. It's a piano bar. So there'll be a piano up there. It could be microphone, but essentially it will probably most of the time will not be mic'd. So it'll just be really for people to enjoy locally, either sitting down at the bar level or up at the mezzanine level to be near the piano and the playing at that location. Then there's a bar with stools that wraps around here and dining tables spread throughout this main dining space here. There's another built-in banquette along there for seating, built-in banquette along the east wall and north edge of the mezzanine up there. There's a door here that leads outside, but that's only a service door. It doesn't really have any hardware on it. It's only to use periodically to move things in and out of that area. Just off of the bar area, you see there's a back hall that leads to that back deck. There's a VIP seating area, we're calling. It's essentially just a small, more intimate area that someone could dine. There's a server station, and the whole kitchen area appears on an upper level. Then this back corridor just runs back to that deck. There's some public restrooms along there. And then that back door leads to that deck. And there's a service door off the kitchen so that food or drinks probably wouldn't come that way, but food could come directly from the kitchen out to the deck that way without having to run down the stair. So you're really quite far away from the piano and any activity there. There's a pretty robust acoustic system that's being installed that has microphones and the capability of doing some microphones for small acoustic ensembles, or if there was maybe a vocal at the piano. So if they're playing, those might be microphoned, or I should say projected into the space using the speaker system inside the building. But there's no intention of projecting or playing any of that music outside.
And besides what would already be in noise ordinance and code, general code, has there been any discussion about potential for a resolution that might address the type of music and the volume and sound that would be committed to by the applicant?
We've not really gone into that. We've the design and the assurances of the piano bar as opposed to a late night rock bar, the fact that they are going to have no outside music, and no outside bands, and no outside bar drinking. We felt fairly comfortable that we wouldn't really need to add that on to it.
If I can to add to that, there was, so this applicant or this property received approval, it was last year, I believe. So now they're seeking an amended approval. That prior resolution did include, as John had mentioned, the that there'd be no bands or permitted on the outside deck or patio area. So the only amplification of music to the outside area shall be during hours of restaurant use. So any condition of the prior approval would be carried over to any new resolution.
Okay. And I'm obviously just being thoughtful about the number of community residents we get about the bars that are out in that corridor, these particular is allowed for people to near it. And that doesn't go back to, but so I'm just being thoughtful about that. So thank you, John. The only other small question I had was, assuming there was some intent for the rear deck arborvitae to provide some form of obstruction or visual obstruction, is it just more or less the case that the boxwood plantings are going to have a similar height that would provide the same obstructive goal that was in the arborvitae?
That's right. The idea really is that the boxwoods on the cantilevered planting bed would provide a better screen, be more successful. It would allow us to be create a more kind of continuous band of green planting and have a much better success of being healthy and viable. The area back there, I mean, I could show you some photos, but it's very narrow slot right there, and it just
the same purpose.
I'm sorry, say again?
I said I was just confirming that it was going to serve the same purpose that the arborvitae, which was in the prior revision, provided.
That's right, absolutely. It's creating a screen between two different uses, really, the deck itself and the apartments. So so that people in the apartments won't be looking up and seeing people on the deck, and people on the deck won't be looking down and seeing people in the apartments. There'll be high back benches, and then the arborvitae, or sorry, the boxwood and the cantilevered planting bed above that, creating a pretty hefty screen.
And there was previously a fence, I believe, that.
Yeah, that's part of the discussion from the Historic Preservation Committee. This is a note from Val and Tom regarding that, which is from May 16th. Says, hi, Autumn and John, HBC Meadow, May 16. Consider minor changes to the project at 107 Main Street, Lemons Green. We have no objection, only one minor suggestion, recommendation. Revisit the design of the roof trellis, not showing four oval apertures. HBC wanted a slightly different designs to that trellis work might achieve the effect that the applicants desire and be more in style with the rest of the structure. However, our guidance does not amount to a requirement the applicants agree to keep the current design should they wish and need. mentioned John mentioned that he had aware of that and was working on that, if I heard you correct. So that has certainly been addressed. The last couple of things that we have, first thing we would need to do is we need to discuss the lighting. Corey's recommended that the board discuss hanging lights that are on the front and maybe get some information to determine that such will not be a hindrance or distraction to traffic. There's no clear detail on the last site plan. John, the lights that are going to be in the front, can you give us a little bit of a description about those lights? Are those hanging lights? Are those just kind of your standard small?
Sure, I can show you that. So what we have right now is, they don't really show on the elevation, but the idea is that there will be hanging lights in the pergola above the outside area. We already have lights up that are on the sign. We discussed those quite a while back. They're bullet lights, spotlights that shine directly just on the sign itself, preventing any glare. They're hidden up inside the eave. And then there are lights that the original lights were going to be flanking the entry door, but we are proposing to move them to the front of the columns, actually, on the street side. Shallow lights that are ADA compliant, or they're up high enough as well. So again, those would be low light accent type lights. And the lights that are in the canopy or in the pergola, they're essentially like an exterior string cafe light. It's exposed black wire with a small black base, the receiver for the LED bulbs that they'll be using. All the lighting will be on dimmers actually as well, so it can be controlled to be brought down to set it the way we want and to help it, control any potential glare. Those lights will be hung just below and a little bit between the rafters of the pergola itself. So the intent is to create light that comes down onto the area where people will be seated rather than spreading light out across the whole front of the building or out onto the sidewalk.
Okay. Any questions on that from any member of the board?
No, that sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. So the last thing that we need to discuss is your landscaping plan must be prepared by a registered landscape architect according to the village code. The last site plan that we have in this that you just presented, I did not, nor did our attorney, see a stamp from a registered landscape architect on that.
Right, we reviewed that with Corey. I thought that was already talked about. We reviewed that with Corey, and his interpretation was that as registered architects doing the type of design that we're doing for this project, that we were qualified to use our own stamp and our own authority for that landscape design.
I think the issue is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that within our code, it says that it must be done by a registered landscape architect. It's not something that we or Corey can say, you're an architect and you're approved to do this. It's something that it's in the code that requires us to use the code. So if you can get us a stamp from a registered landscape architect, that will pretty much be everything.
So let me ask, we'll follow up on that then. That's pretty clear. If we were to submit this A001 drawing as it is, showing the plants and the plantings and the notation, the design, and then had a landscape architect just simultaneously sign and seal it, or maybe even in lieu of Alan's, would that suffice?
So I think you'll need two different, because the architect stamp will be required for the other elements of the plan. The registered landscape architect is really just for the landscaping, so you could have both on the one plan, but the requirement is for the landscaping plan to be prepared by the RLA. So if they have any changes that they're recommending, that should be, incorporated. And I do note those in the rear where you have the assorted specimen trees. I don't know if you specified what those were in your table. I didn't see it, but you probably,
Yeah, we did.
if
It's
we want
the,
to know. And
yeah, sorry. Yeah, those are the specimen trees are outlined in the table. It's the,
okay, maybe, I guess it wasn't clear to me what, because you show, I think, 4 there and
you know, we were, so we, well, I guess what we need to do is just tag which ones of these are the specimen trees, maybe to make it more clear. So we added the trees here and they're called out back here. We didn't want to necessarily say that the spring snow crabapple will be here and then the whichever one would be the next one there.
it's just going to be a mix of this, I guess, just so that the board hasn't, or so it's clear how many of each might be in that area. Just, I know those were part of the screening, so.
Sure. Okay. We'll, we can add some specificity to that for sure.
Okay. So if we have those two things, then we should probably be able to move pretty quickly to getting an approval.
Great. So being a little more clear on the specification of those specimen trees, which ones might be where, or how many we might have back there, and then getting the SLA stamp on this drawing, essentially.
Yeah.
Great.
Anything else?
That was it, I believe.
So if we get that done, then we could look at getting a resolution approval for this.
Which you had authorized actually at the
Previous meeting.
previous meeting, but because these had started, but because there were some issues you had to address. We'll have that for next time. Did you submit a light spec for all of the lights? Because I just saw the step light in the latest submission.
The previous lights had been submitted previously and we weren't changing those, so I didn't resubmit the previous lights.
Okay, it might be helpful if you could just do a complete submission next time. That way it's, we're able to locate everything in one package.
Okay. So complete lighting package. Okay. So we could submit that. That's no problem. And so to be clear, what I'll submit revised will be that lighting package, this sheet A001, updating the clarifications on the specimen trees and adding any other changes the SLA decides that they need to have on here for their own approval, and they'll sign and seal that as well. I don't see a need to resubmit A003. Nothing's changing on that. I'll just submit the that step light with the full package, all the other lighting. And then unless there are some changes from the SLA, which I don't think there would be, I wouldn't be resubmitting A200 either. So it would just be the A001 and the lighting package. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Okay. So we'll look forward to you having that information submitted fairly quickly, and then we'll have it for our next meeting to be able to move forward pretty quickly.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Take care.
Okay. So now we move to the fourth site plan, the fourth application to the site plan and special use permit for PB 2201, 100 Woodland Pond Circle. So welcome again. So we've held public hearings, we've gone through stretch codes, we've gone through a number of different things. So our next steps are, we're going to have to review the applicant's commitment to protecting wetlands letter, which is sent out. Discuss a wetland buffer issue, discuss parkland and whether or not it should be requested. And if those are all in order, then we can move forward quickly as well. So the first thing we want to do is to get to the applicant's commitment to protecting the wetlands letter. Autumn, can you, does everybody have that?
Dated the 16th.
Also in
Councilwoman Ron. Called Woodland Pond Lair Eastern Cottage Wetland.
So there's,
Got it, thank you. Kevin Bernstein is joining me.
Sorry?
We have a new Kevin Bernstein who's joining the meeting.
Council.
Okay.
We had engaged him because there were some questions going back to the original Article 78 lawsuit and settlement. And he was the attorney that was on record at that time, so we've got,
Okay.
if there's questions that arose today, he's got that institutional knowledge.
Great, that's good. All right, let's go to the commitment to protecting wetlands. The letter states, the chairman, the intent of this letter is to memorialize the offer that I made at the planning board meeting on June 7, 2022, regarding efforts that Woodland Pond will undertake to ensure that an existing federal wetland is impacted as little as possible following the construction of a planned new duplex cottage on our campus. The cottage and wetland in question are located to the east of George Danskin Way, adjacent to an existing duplex cottage. I have offered and committed to: 1, eliminating the use of non-organic chemical pesticides and herbicides from the entire southeastern lawn, including existing lawn, outside of the perimeter of roads. This will extend from our current no pesticide zone south and westerly until our property line on George Danskin Way. 2, reducing the size of the lawn behind this proposed duplex down to the minimum that allows for the building structure to be unimpeded by approaching brush. 3, working with our groundsman, Mark Eisenhandler, on a planting plan behind this duplex that enhances protected wetland characteristics, or planting a buffer, quote unquote, as Ms. Lagodka said at the meeting. We're committed to protecting the ecological treasure that is our campus and the lands. Appreciate the opportunity to continue to collaborate with the planning board. Signed by Michelle, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your last name, Gramolia. Gramolia, thank you. President and CEO. So, any questions or comments related to that letter from anyone or? No, okay. We certainly do appreciate that letter. Thank you for that. That works well with what we're all trying to accomplish here. So the next issue that we're going to have to look at is to discuss the wetland buffer issue. So first off, the items identified in the applicant's commitments to protecting wetlands will be incorporated as conditions. So related to the wetland and the wetlands buffer, and it's good you brought someone here that's got the individual knowledge and can remember this, because it actually predates me on the planning board, and I've been on the planning board for quite a while. This does predate me. So the April 2000 plan does not delineate a specific wetland buffer. The buffer itself is not defined what buffer means.
Correct.
And
If I could jump in there,
please, go
sure.
right ahead.
So there was this lawsuit in 2007 that resolved in the settlement that said the planning board had to approve a plan that was as protective, or that contained at least the same buffer as was shown in this April 2007 plan. Nothing on the plan is specifically labeled buffer. With that title, there's a line showing the limits of disturbance that varies in distance. It is separated from the wetlands. So reviewing the minutes and the prior seeker documentation, there was some discussion about a 100-foot wetland buffer, and that's something that's required for DEC regulated wetlands, but not for Army Corps, which are federal, exactly on the site. So it appears that there was this goal back then to have the 100-foot buffer from all of the wetlands, even though that wouldn't be required by actual state law, but that in some places there was going to be intrusions into what's being called that buffer area. So there's been a lot of back and forth on this because the April 2007 plan was not previously located until recently. So now, based on all this and looking back at the record, this appears to be where we are. That there was this, the planning board at the time was intending there to be 100 feet, but there were certain areas that it was less than that. The one issue with this specific site plan revision that's before you is the one cottage or the one duplex that is the easternmost, I believe.
Right. And that one does have some intrusion into that area in question.
Right, so if I may, what sort of where I'm at, where I've concluded as to where we are right now is I think that whatever the intention was not well drafted in the legal documents or on the map. So now I think it's a matter of us parsing out how comfortable are we finding a path down a non-well drafted legal, conclusion. We also, I might ask if we might, one or more of our members might be able to come to maybe Autumn's office and look at the plan that you're looking at that you are indicating demarks a disturbance area, because the documents that we have don't actually state that anywhere either. So that even the disturbance area is not delineated specifically, at least in the documents that I've seen. Maybe you've seen something different. So I'd like to offer that we come to Autumn's office, look at whatever you're looking at, because certainly if it's demarked on the document, we certainly need to comply with that. But the document versions that we have do not demark that. Kevin, do you have anything you'd like to add?
For good or for bad, I was around, and I wasn't on the board, of course, back in 2007, but I was involved in the approvals for this original project and involved in the litigation. And I actually have gone through a lot of old correspondence and emails just to try to, get a sense of, what's the answer to this question that we're confronting here, particularly with regard to that one cottage, one duplex, if you will. So, I do think it's important to kind of, all I see from what I can tell from at least a digital version of the April 2007 the site plan, and then the site plan that's been submitted in support of the application before you, is that it doesn't show, it shows limits of construction disturbance for the current project, but doesn't necessarily show well, I didn't think I was being that. A wetland buffer. But I will tell you this, from my memory, is that, the village planning board certainly were very meticulous in making, and George Danskin was the chair. I don't know if any of you knew George, but he was pretty meticulous where he had worked for the DEC or was working for the DEC at the time he was chair at the time. So he was well versed in wetlands and wetland buffers. But so the lawsuit was settled when the judge signed a stipulation of discontinuance on the last day of April, actually. And so there had been ongoing discussions with the village planning board. Their engineer at that time was Dave Clauser, and the project's engineers about modifications to the project. And there were quite a few modifications to the project in order to get to a point where it could be settled, and it was. But then the work wasn't done yet, because then they had to put together a plan that kind of incorporate all those agreements, if you will, and that took another couple of months actually, because a month and a half, because the final decision was not signed by George until June 12th, and then even after that, there was some post-decision requirements there that had to be done. So there was a lot of back and forth, and I can tell you that if there was an area on the site plan that the planning board at that time intended not to be disturbed forever, if you will, it would have been marked on that drawing. But I think we do need to go back and to take a look at some of the historic files, and I think that will be helpful for some additional dialogue. I do also think that it seems that there's there's been no comment at least, or no disagreement with regard to two of the other duplexes or cottages, if you will, in terms of whether or not those would, for some reason have, potentially be incompatible with this stipulation. And so what I would, I guess, ask the board's indulgence about is give us a little bit of time to have some discussions and look at this one particular area and look at old site plans. But with the other two, maybe we could, with the other two cottages or duplexes, if we could move forward with those, so kind of with a phased approach. So, and what we're here to tell you is we're not, we've made our arguments in writing, but we're not necessarily digging our heels in. We want to obtain more information about that one particular location that's been identified in Mr. Schneidewin's, if that's how you pronounce his name, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, letters. But there, like I said, there is something that he and we agree on, and that is these other two locations that don't run afoul of any potential, settlement violation that's been asserted. So I would ask that the board consider moving forward in light of the changes that have been made that I think were just summarized before, and then give us a chance to take a look at the drawings, have some further discussions, and come back before the board. And hopefully we can get to a point where there's, and I'm not saying this is why this is your, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just make sure that there's no potential litigation concern because of some asserted incompatibility with the stipulation. So that's what I would kind of propose as a path forward. So we make some progress, but yet we know that we have some homework to do.
I appreciate you offering that. That's nice. I like that. In regards to litigation, things of that nature, we just want to make sure that we're very careful for both of us, so that we both are protected. We both are, because we're both aiming to do the right thing. There's no intention to do something wrong. We need to make sure that we are doing it properly, and as you said, we can do it. I did ask for Dennis Larios, who is our engineer, to come on. He can provide a little bit of background and information on this. He did some research on this as well. And then after Dennis speaks, we'll take some comments from the board, and then we'll see if we can chart a path halfway.
Hey, good evening. I'm sorry I had to move into my garage because my dogs were barking. So I'm in a dark, gloomy area right now. But it's good to hear.
Your dog was only barking when the lawyer was talking.
That's true. It didn't start until this agenda item came up. Then the other one started. It was good to hear Kevin's explanation. I agree that that the stipulation language with respect to honoring the buffer protection in the April 2007 plan can be, I think it can be interpreted in 2 or 3 different ways. Looking at the historic submissions there, and the fact that no buffer was identified on the April 2007 plan specifically. So what the intent of that language was, I'm not sure and haven't been able to figure out, although there was a conservation easement layered on that plan between the wetland itself and the development area. So that could be one interpretation that I would lean to, but it could be interpreted to include a lot broader area. So I also thought today, in speaking with Ashley and John, that if we could get to an approval of cottage locations 1 and 3, and have the applicant do some work on cottage area 2 and some further research to determine what applies there. It would leave the board in a much better position and would allow at least 2 of the 3 cottage projects to advance without, hopefully without the concern of litigation. So So I like that approach. I think Kevin just articulated it. So that would seem to be the best approach. And there are some things that can be done with cottage to mitigate any wetland issue, but if it's in this area that's defined in the stipulation, it still could be problematic. So I know you have a letter agreeing to certain things, but I didn't see any provisions for capture of stormwater from the developed site, from cottage to site, before it would sheet run off towards the wetlands. So that would be something that might be added as a mitigant in addition to the organic stipulation to use strictly organic lawn treatment and limit the lawn size, which are good ideas as well. So if they could somehow modify their application for the time being, just include those cottage areas 1 and 3, I'd certainly be comfortable with recommending to move forward. And if their engineers can provide some technical, enhancements around cottage 2 that might to present to the board too, along with maybe a little further historic research. But I know Ashley's looked at all the documents. I've looked at all the documents. Sounds like Kevin's looked at all the documents, and it's fuzzy with respect to that buffer issue.
So let's do this. First, we're going to start. Any comments from the board on this potential approach to the issue that we have here? Any questions about what the food issue is, or any other type of questions? While we have Dennis here and we've got our attorney present, does anybody have any questions about the issue?
Well, I guess I had a question, because I thought after reading comments from both parties' lawyers and Dennis that it seemed like, okay, the approved plan, like that line that said the easement, conservation easement, that represented the buffer, and I thought that was seemed like we were agreeing on that, and now it seems a little less clear to me. So are we saying that the approved site plan from I guess it was June 2007 is not, that there's no buffer on that?
So the approved site plan from June shows the conservation easement as one piece and also shows limits of clearing.
Right.
So they don't match up. So the issue is that clearing limits line versus the conservation easement line represents, in this particular area, what would be the buffer that was intended to be protected.
The conservation easement line is more restrictive.
No.
No, it's less, right, okay. And so, yeah, I guess I was seeing after comments this week that, okay, like it seemed like we could, as long as we're inside that conservation easement, it was okay, and that third cottage was acceptable. But maybe that's now being called into question.
Yes.
And it's really in looking back, so I went back through the minutes from when all this was happening back in 2006, 2007, and the SEIS document as well. And these things talk about 100-foot buffer, which is where the conservation easement line isn't 100 feet away from the wetland. So, and the limits of disturbance as shown, I don't know that it's not measured. So I don't know that is, 100 feet either, or what that distance is. So all of these,
I
I
can
guess.
shed a little light on that aspect if I may. So adjacent to where this duplex is contemplated for is an existing duplex, which was approved in the site plan within the same footprint as what we're proposing. So there is already an existing building there that's almost equidistant to what we're proposing. So at some point that was able to be approved. So if we are able to come back to with some additional research, that is one thing I would want to point to as well.
You mean in this, something that was approved but not built?
So it's
Or-
it's constructed.
Yes, but I would just respond to that in the record, it did stipulate also that the planning board was allowing certain aspects of the project to occur within a buffer. And of the project that was, shown at that time and then ultimately constructed, because they realized it wasn't practical in all cases to just pull a distance off of a federal wetland and say you can't do anything in that area. So they did allow, with some practicality, the project to advance the way it was proposed at the time. But it does, and someone spoke at the public hearing last month and had a totally different interpretation of what this buffer area was, a much broader understanding. So that was raised to the board last month during the public hearing. So I think if I was interpreting it solely, I would, since I saw this conservation easement layered onto the plans, you would have thought that was the intent, to add a protection between the development and the wetland. And also, I think the stipulation called for roof water recharge for 2 of the wetlands, which I think were incorporated into the plans at the time. But it is, it can be interpreted in 2 or 3 different ways, based on at least the language I see and looking at the documents. I did ask Kazin folks who are now Labella, but if they had anyone in the Poughkeepsie office, I think that worked on the project back in 2006, 2007. If they had a recollection, they said there was no one there anymore that worked on the project. I also talked to Andy Willingham, who was working for David Clauser at the time.
Right.
And he didn't specifically remember this buffer issue. So.
I don't remember that Andy was he working with Dave at the time?
That's what he told me.
Okay,
Yes.
I just remember that, yeah.
Got an affirmation from the said person at the back of the room. Here,
He was, I know.
Andy Willingham in the back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get that. Could you try again?
I think Siri heard you.
I have a question. Wait, am I muted?
No.
No, you're fine.
No.
Go right ahead.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Okay, so my question is for Dennis. As an engineer, let's say that this third, or we're calling it the second cottage, where this cottage is let's say that's in the easement, in the buffer. Where would you move it? If you could move that cottage so that it would have the least incursion, be the least intrusive to the conservation easement in the buffer, can you see another place on the site where you could move it? Or would it be possible to say, instead of the cottages being a duplex, make it a quadruplex or one of them or something like that? I mean, I know it's difficult, but just.
I didn't peruse the site. All 3 locations where they're showing the cottages, they're keeping it very tight and in such a way to minimize disturbance and use the existing infrastructure and roads. So it's really just some grading and construction of the cottages and the utilities. I think there are things that could be added to the plan that would be give you people that are concerned strictly about protecting the wetland there that would provide a lot more comfort, maybe.
Good, okay.
But that doesn't, if it's in that buffer area and someone wants to challenge it, challenge the board's decision, whether they collect and treat every drop of water that comes off that site, and do the other measures that are identified in the letter you received. I think it still could be interpreted as being in this area, being contrary to the stipulation in settlement, right? I'm not a lawyer, but.
Right, so, I mean, do you see any place where you could move it, is what I'm asking as well? Or
I
could it be
didn't-
relocated so that it's not in the buffer?
I didn't see any such area, but I didn't. I mean, you could ask the applicant and their engineers that, or I'd be willing to review that, but I didn't look at the entire site and see if there was another spot for this cottage number 2. But
All right, Michelle would like to weigh in.
Just very briefly.
Yeah, sure.
So we, as you know, we did an application for 3 duplex style units. We had actually asked the engineer when they originally were doing the plan to give us as detailed options as possible on the site, because we're trying to maximize, our, growing our mission, et cetera. And they had initially identified 6 locations on the site that are technically buildable, but these were the 3 least impactful. All of the others would have required a significant amount more grading, soil disturbance and things like that. So there are technically other locations, but they would be much more disruptive to the existing property, and they would not be able to tie into the existing utilities in the way that these were. And as Dennis said, we selected these locations because we can really just plug and play in terms of the utilities and things like that. So I'd like to have an opportunity to go back to our architect and engineer to identify additional wetland risk mitigation factors into the design of that other duplex. If it's agreeable to the planning board, we can submit a revised application for the other 2 that don't seem to be in question, and maybe proceed with those if that's agreeable. And then we can work on the 3rd duplex, continue that process on the 3rd duplex.
Thank you. That's a substantial offer. So let's just get a sense of the board, and actually, do we need to take a vote as to whether we would want to receive a revised site plan application concentrating on cottages
1 and 3.
1 and 3, with further study to be done on cottage 2, and that the applicant would return at a later date information for cottage 2. I don't know how you.
So, yeah, I don't think you need a motion to actually have that all happen, but if it's something the board it sounds like it's receptive of that approach, and I don't think that would be an issue legally from doing this type of phase, because they are inherently on their own separate matters. So it's not like all 3 have to be voted on at the same time. So I think you could do that by a revised application, cover letter explaining revised plan, saying we're revising it at this time to seek approval only of cottages 1 and 3, I guess.
So then our approval would be.
Would be an ultimate approval that you would set that
Clearly,
forth.
cottages 1 and 3, with the return on the second phase of the project being cottage number 2.
Mhm. And that would be in any resolution. They would have to revise the plan though to show the removal to just show the 2 that they were seeking at that point.
So
I did have a question about that. I didn't want to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could the one cabin or cottage that we need to do further research on and have further discussion, can that simply be kind of tabled and the other 2 carved out, so that way you don't have to have another public hearing on that one?
Well, that's part of our discussions here. I think what we're going to do first is we're going to get a sense of the board as to whether they agree with this approach, and then the next facet is that we're going to have to allow our attorney to come up with a proper description and plan for it so that we can move forward with the offer that they've made, and then we can communicate that to all parties, saying this is the path that we're going to make forward to get this done. And at the same time, we can perhaps do that at our next meeting, and then we can agree on the ground rules and then go. For those that are still.
That makes sense.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, I think that's, that's the fastest way to, get your approval and, report.
Yeah, I agree that coming in where I am on it, sounds like that one is still something to work. I don't think, take your advice, Ashley, on this, but I don't think we would want to consider the 2 cottage plan with any reference or stipulation to the 3rd cottage. My recommendation would be that we just see a new plan with those 2 that seem to be likely to meet approval real quickly. And then you may choose not to return back to the 3rd, so I wouldn't want to commingle the consideration of the 3rd. Somebody's going to do it. Just do it, yeah. Rachel?
I agree. I also just wanted to make one comment about the disturbance. If there was a way to modify the buildings so that you're not, cutting and filling, how you could sort of put them when there's a steep grading, you can kind of set the building into the hill kind of thing.
Okay. Right. So the sense that we have now is that we're going to, the plan is to work with cottages 1 and 3, and to, I don't know how we do it, but we modify the site plan. Actually, I believe it's
So
up
I
to
think
you.
it would be, the applicant would submit a revised site plan showing just cottages 1 and 3. And the board could authorize me to draft a resolution of approval for cottages 1 and 3 upon submission of the revised plan.
Okay. Everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes. That sounds great.
Any possibility that this could get voted on at the next meeting, or?
The resolution of approval, what else would we be lacking with just those 2 cottages?
The parkland
We're gonna talk about the
discussion.
parkland, but that really is just the parkland we're gonna talk about here in the next few moments. We're kind of down to that, so.
Thank you.
All right, so our attorney is going to create that document. We're going to get the information on the site plan from applicants. Now, the next thing that we need to discuss relates to parkland recreation requirements under the village code.
Did you do, I'm sorry, I think you were gonna make a motion to authorize me to draft that resolution. I don't know that the motion was actually made.
Okay, so we're now going to get a motion to authorize our attorney to write a resolution of approval for the modified site plan. Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll be getting that resolution of approval going. So the last thing we need to discuss are parkland and recreation requirements under the village code. The code requires well, under the village code, it says site plans containing residential units must provide for adequate public parkland or recreation areas suitably located for parkland, playground, or other recreation purposes. Planning board believes to discuss parkland requirements determine the following: 1, whether the village has need for parkland recreation facilities, and 2, whether the site plan will contribute to that need. Land it references another village law. Land for park, playground, and the recreational areas may not be required until the authorized board has made a finding of proper case, blah, blah, blah. Regulation in the village based on projected population growth to which the particular site plan will contribute. So the first part of it is that we have to determine, does the village have a need for parkland and recreation facilities?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
we all agree on that. So the second item is whether the site plan will contribute to that need.
I don't know. I feel that any additional residents will be using the village impulse parks and not just staying on site. So I think it does contribute some amount to that need.
Okay.
How many residents would be in the two estimate?
So it would be a total of additionally potentially 12 people. And I would ask the board to consider the 13 years of experience that we have with our current residents not utilizing village parkland space. Typically, when our residents are recreating, they're either using our 60 acres of trail systems that are in our conservation easement, or typically they're going to the Mohawk Preserve or other places where we provide transportation to. I would be very surprised if this created a significant issue for village parks, if we just aren't seeing it with our existing residents. They tend to stay on our campus because, as I said, we do have the 60 acres of trails and the conservation easement, or they'll take our transportation provided to Mohawk Preserve and other places. So I would respectfully disagree with that.
Do those 12 residents ever have families visit that then go ahead and use the property, other aspects of parkland and recreation in town?
I would never want to say no, because I'm sure some do. The extent, though, I would think if you've got a couple of grandkids that come periodically, it's not going to be extensive by any means. So I would just ask the board to consider our existing experience and the fact that our residents aren't typically the ones that you're seeing in your parks.
Thank you.
And so forth.
While we understand that private recreation opportunities you have on site will probably be more likely used by the residents than the public would. The issue is, will in general an increase in population contribute to an increased need in parkland for the village as a whole, and not specifically for an apartment complex that may have their on-site recreation facilities, health clubs and whatnot, but will it in general? And I have to say that, yes, in general speaking, that it does, an increase in population does increase the need for parkland and recreation. So that is my opinion. So we have indeed decided that there is a need for parkland recreation. So we have also then discussed, and it appears that whether the site plan will contribute to that need in the general sense of the community. Actually, what do we need to do for that? Do we need to pass a resolution with that, or?
So your findings would be incorporated into your ultimate resolution. The next piece of that is that because they're not showing any new public parkland on the property, and the village code has very specific requirements for what would be adequate parkland or recreation land under your site plan law, it would be to waive the requirement to show public parkland and instead require fee in lieu of parkland for each new residential unit. And that amount set by the village board.
May I just add two comments? One is more of a question than a comment, and it relates to the fact that my understanding is that this village law code assumes that all of the people that are moving to our organization already don't reside in New Paltz. So if someone is making a lateral move from a private residence into our community within New Paltz, I would think that would reduce the impact. So they're existing New Paltz residents and they're just moving from, like a private residence into Woodland Pond. I would be hard pressed to think that's considered to be additive. That's point number one. The second question that I have would be, I'd ask the board to please consider the fact that our conservation easement language by design requires us to allow public use of that property in the conservation easement. So because we're required to allow the public in the conservation land, I think that that should be considered, because technically that's approximately 60 acres that we have contributed back to the community. Our systems link into the Millbrook Preserve trails. We help them to maintain the trailhead by Woodland Pond, and I would like that to be considered as part of the decision-making process.
Thank you.
And just to comment on the one piece of the requirement for parkland and for recreation land, it's tied to the creation of new residential units rather than new residents. So if you have, in your example, for example, if you have a lateral move somewhere else in the village, then it's opened up to someone that might not be in the village. So I think that's why the law is as written, it's for the creation of new actual units versus where are the people coming from. And I think it'd be impossible to predict and to determine where people would be coming from in any event.
So is it tied to units or people?
Units.
Okay, so then there's only 6 new units. Not,
Units.
so we're not talking about 12, just 6 new units, correct?
So yes, I believe that's how the village sets their fees based on, and I don't know how specific it gets if it's.
We just recommend to the village board that based upon the increase in units, that we believe that there is a need for more parkland, and because in lieu of dedicating land to a new park, which you can do, a fee would be required based upon whatever the requirements are by the village board. We don't get into assessing. We just recommend, and then the negotiations between.
Or I think it's in an annual resolution typically, or in a resolution, so it'll say for single family homes, it's this for, depending on the type of residential unit, the village has different categories.
That's not something we get into.
So this is more of a village board issue. And so we could have a further discussion with the village board and they would take your recommendation into account.
Correct.
Because I mean, we would of course argue with to the village board that the conservation easement property does provide, that level of park accessibility. And I don't even know when that code section went into play, but was it after the original project was built? Remember?
I do not.
I have a question.
I think it was after, because we have a sizable parkland fee that we paid with the original project. And we have 201.
Yeah, I don't remember that coming up myself, to be honest. So I mean, we in essence would assert to the village board that we should be given credit for all the conservation easement lands that we are providing to the public as kind of an aspect of parkland, if you will, to the extent that.
Wait a minute. I have a question about that, if it's possible. I remember reading the conservation easement, and then it was an issue at the time because it doesn't permit or forbid specifically the public from walking on the paths at Woodland Pond. And I know that there was some negotiation with the Millbrook Preserve because obviously it would connect up there. But I didn't know there had been a change made and that they were specifically allowing the public that they were going to allow the paths to connect to the Millbrook and the people were going to be allowed to walk around the pond there. That's news to me. If that's true, that's a considerable, it's like 60 acres or something like that, right?
Right, yeah. So I mean, I think that what we would want to do is, I mean, because the conservation was entered into so long ago, is that we obviously would want to take a look at that before appearing before the village board. We want to be accurate in any assertion we would make, covering your point, Rachel. But I don't remember exactly the wording of it, but I do specifically remember that walking trails were included and improved actually. We even negotiated the kind of improvements we could make to the trails, even what those improvements would include in terms of chips and so on and so forth. That's part of what I remember, but I'd want to take a look at the conservation easement specifically, before. Go ahead. Sorry.
Do that. Yeah, I can speak to the screen, there's nobody to listen. I can appreciate that, but again, our function here tonight is simply to make a recommendation that there is a need and that the site plan will contribute to the need. The individual negotiations, that's an issue that you're going to have to take up with the village board. And while I think it's a profitable discussion, we probably need to move on because we all understand now that that's a village board question. So,
Okay.
all right. So, what do we need to do now? Actually, in relation to that, I'm sorry, I just got sidetracked.
So your findings will be incorporated rather than voting tonight, we'll incorporate those into the ultimate resolution. And then again, it would be to find that the fee in lieu would be required and that amount is set by the village. I think as far as tonight for this application, I think that was it.
Okay. So thank you very much for your offer. We do appreciate it. I think that is a great offer and it's going to help us move forward very quickly for you to get part of your project up and going.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Good night.
Good night. So the next is site plan subdivision PB 2113, 54 South Mannheim. Mannheim is, come on up, guys. So everyone knows the history here. We have a secret type of action that we've got a neg deck on 6722. The referral required, Ulster County Planning Board, the referral response contains some required modifications, which I think, are you aware of those, Andy?
Right.
Highway work permit from NISDOT will be, need to be approved and obtained. Granting the variance in the village PDA will be necessary as condition of approval, referral of the height variance. The county planning board, village applicant, look at way proposal is meeting the New York State stretch energy house. So those are kind of the those are some of the preliminaries. DBA applies to DBA for variance building height 37.5, 37 feet 5 inches building height, where a maximum of 30 is allowed.
So if you might recall, there are two variances that the applicant needed. One was for the building height and the second was from the requirement to have two access points, which is required under the special use permit criteria for senior residential dwelling development. So the applicant has submitted some sketch plans, two options of ways to add a second exit that would eliminate the need for that variance. And I understand the building inspectors reviewed them and determined that both would comply. So at this point, the applicant can go over their proposals, their suggestions, and then hear feedback from the board on which you prefer, or any other questions or comments.
Yeah, just as a note to Rachel, that is SK2 and SK3 that were part of the submission. Yeah. So,
So, yeah, so we're back here really solely for this access, second means of access. We know we have, like we talked about last time, we know we have a bunch of work to do. The county comments, the Dennis Lario's comments, and we want to come back with really like everything addressed. We really can't do that until we resolve this second access issue. So, Rick, I know you're new to this. This has been getting bounced around a little bit. The code says you need two means of vehicular access for senior citizen development. So originally we went to the zoning board for a variance from it, and it was pretty clear that they didn't want to give that variance. So we changed, passed a little bit. We were back to this board the last time with two options. One was a boulevard entrance that had an island in the center, And the other option was widening the pedestrian access out to 32, to essentially have 2 accesses out to 32, and the pedestrian access would be wider and you'd be able to drive down it. And it seemed that this board's preference was the boulevard, which Corey's initial interpretation was that didn't meet code as far as 2 means of vehicular access to boulevard. But that the pedestrian one likely did, was his initial interpretation. So we went to the ZBA, we were already gonna be there anyway, to see what they thought about the boulevard, because it seemed like the board, this board kind of like the boulevard option, and they did not. So, and I'll leave it at that. So we're back to the option of the pedestrian access widened, and we did go to the DOT just to make sure that they were going to be on board with it, and that's SK1.
Which we can hear is, okay, so we're looking at SK1 as one.
I'm sorry, I think it's SK2.
Oh,
SK2, I'm sorry, SK2. Yeah, SK1 was the boulevard. No longer.
So also, sketch all two.
Yeah, all 2 SK2. And so the DOT would need an actual crosswalk and curb ramps at the entrance. They would need the breakaway bollards. They would need some signage that said emergency access only, and that would be on both sides. So there'd be a fair amount of signage and some bollards. And they would likely need a whole new sidewalk just because of the on 32 there. And there's 75 feet of distance between the center lines. The DOT was preliminarily okay with this option. And then we went and looked at possibly connecting to Hasbro Place. We knew that there was some grade issues back there. Now this is going on to SK3. And we knew that a full 22-way access was going to be a ton of grading, private retaining wall, but it turns out the 12-foot access isn't too bad. It's a little bit of grading, but it does kind of work better than we thought, and it does provide access to the pond. And this option would be a gated, just a full gate that only emergency vehicles could go through.
And the intent of having a secondary entrance was,
As the code says,
fire and emergency.
yeah, it didn't say that. It just says 2 means of vehicular access.
So would that be
Broken down vehicle in one.
or fire truck in one and the ambulance? This doesn't mean just for regular traffic.
This would be, no.
Even if you had the code.
The code just says 2 means of
Please come out.
vehicular access, and Corey's determined that this would suffice.
So we sent these to Corey and said, does this meet, essentially, does this meet the portion of code? And he said, yes, it's a one-way vehicular access used by vehicles.
Would not be, neither would be a regular use as indicated by you. You said this one would be gated, the one in SK3, and the one in SK2 would be like either bollards that drop down or they just knock over or something. But anyway, it would look like an impassable,
Right.
unless you knew it was emergency.
Right. And I will say that, I mean, it's a well-intended piece of code for this type of development. Some developments have kind of difficult access. You have a steep road, a long road, a wooded road, this is right on top of the steep road. This is access across from the college. So access to this particular building is not difficult.
So really what we need to do is to choose between these 2 plans. Questions?
Shoot, I can't.
Cut off here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, it would be
Laid over like that. Or Any discussion about them?
Well, personally, I think I'm more for which one? SK3, just because the idea of having these two entrances right next to each other seems like it just would not look visually that good, and it wouldn't actually really serve its purpose if there was an obstruction in that. It seems like
Fine.
the entrance on the other side would actually, provide for a little more safety and usefulness in case of an emergency.
So these would be for use by primarily emergency vehicles. So how difficult would it be for, how much more difficult would it be for around Joe Allen, come back down through Orchard Lane, and down through Hasbrook Place?
No, not Joe Lynn. Orchard Lane connects directly to 32. If you look at a map, this will go.
So these both connect to 32 then?
Yeah, Orchard Lane's a dead end or like a T. Yeah, Hasbrook goes to Orchard Lane, that comes out to 32.
So how do you get to Hasbrook Lane?
So look at the map, John. So around 32, you make a right on Orchard, it gets you to Hasbrook. And then that's where my arrow is the little end. Got it. And they would take it from that end. I got it. And would there be any requirement for easement or any considerations for this thing labeled lot 1?
Yeah, they'll need to be using lot 1, then they own.
That's a home.
Yeah.
What could be like watching their car out driveway and block this emergency access, maybe? Or set up a basketball hoop and have kids playing 2-on-2.
Probably have to put some restrictions.
Yeah, so I guess is that where does the Hasbrook right of way end compared to, I guess, their driveway?
It would be that thick white line.
Yeah. That's their lot.
Right. It would be about a 50-foot segment through the private property, which we could put any kind of restrictions needed. Yeah.
So it's clear when you never obstruct this land.
Yeah, I personally like SB2. It keeps it all close and within the building and property.
One to one.
1-to-1. It just means to me that lot 2, SK3, you're having to inherit more of your lot. And then you've got to get an easement. There's no guarantee that you're granted an easement.
Well, he owns it, so he owns it. Yeah, they're creating one. Okay. So we can definitely, but you're right, that it's nice. It's nice woods back there and more disturbance.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Josh, about the interruption of 32 that, cycling and pedestrian is going to be another thing that people will have to cross. But I don't think it's particularly offensive if it's not in regular use, if it's clearly sectioned off, it's not traffic going through it.
something we should require. And I think that if the intent of that code is emergency access, it feels like, you know, coming down Orchard, Hasbrook, and then finding a full driveway and opening up the gate is a lot less accessible than this idea of the two near each other. So I don't, I think I would lean toward SK2. If I thought all things.
Rachel, what's your thoughts?
I think this is difficult. I tend to be for less pavement. I mean, if you were to, on average, like, how often do you think the emergency access would need to be used? Just, I mean, has that been calculated?
Never. Probably, probably never. I mean, I don't see a situation where this driveway will get blocked in that small section, but that's my opinion.
So I go with the least disturbance.
Yeah, so that would be SK2 definitely, because we're at that pedestrian path, which is gonna be less wide if we do the Hasbrook option. We're still gonna build it.
All right, well, that appears then to be, all right, 3-1 on SK2.
And you said the ZBA preferred one or the other?
They,
Was that a different issue you were describing?
yeah, it was
They were-
different. It was a different option they're looking at. That's all.
All right, so what we're saying then is SK2.
Good. That's really, I mean, it kind of affects everything we're doing, so we wanted to get there.
All right,
That's easy, right?
that's it, we're done. It's the easiest thing I'm gonna have all night. All right, well, thank you very much. So next is special use permit, commercial retail, other dispensary, PB 220887 North Chestnut. He's liable. Here. Application for special use permit approval of a retail business not otherwise mentioned. Classifies as type of action, property located on state 32, exempt from referral that you, the Ulster County Planning Board, reoccupancy to reuse existing structures, as long as the following conditions are met. Actually, you want to walk us through that, what that means?
Sure, let me just get to that one. So you have your agreement with Ulster County Planning Board that although some properties are within what would normally trigger their review, if they meet certain exemptions, then they do not have to be reviewed. This particular exemption is if it's reoccupancy or reuse of an existing structure, so long as the following are met. 1, an increase in parking is not required by local statute. 2, channelized access to state or county road exists or is proposed. And 3, new site lighting, if proposed, utilizes full cutoff luminaires and does not exceed IEA lighting levels. So I think the one question here would be whether an increase in parking is required by local statute. The way your code in the village deals with parking requirements for non-residential uses, but business, it's for the planning board to set the parking to determine what is to be required. The code has guidelines, but it's up to the planning board. So I believe in the past for referral to the county purposes, unless the code specifically requires it, you wouldn't refer it. So you could always though refer it to the county just for advisory comments, even if it's not required by their agreement.
All right, so our next step, what do we have to do here? Attorney?
So you received recently a memo from, or I'm sorry, not recently, last month from the building inspector. He had some review comments. I don't believe you've had a meeting to review those yet. Those were from May 17th. Does anyone recall if those were reviewed previously?
Oh, it's in
I'm looking for Corey's memo, and I'm looking in the drive. I don't have the drive with me. No, we don't.
Did you get a copy of that? Do you recall? Okay. I could start summarizing, going through those. So the first item was references the cover letter said there is a pre-approved office area. That's incorrect in this case here, as the area to be used as accessory to the proposed use being considered for a special use permit. And this area should also be included in the approval and permit. So that'll have to be made clear in any resolution. Number two, references that you did submit the special use permit part 5 application information. So that's something the planning board should review. You have those 4 criteria that are applicable to all special use permits, whether you're satisfied with the applicant's answers, if you have any questions, need any additional information, that should be addressed. Number 3, the floor plan that was submitted was non-contextual in that it only showed the space to be used. Given that the applicant self-determined that there were several areas within this proposal of different uses, there should be a more descriptive floor plan submitted to allow the planning board to discuss the literal operation of the business, i.e. operational flow path, ingress and egress points, delineate between retail, storage, and office space. Number 4, and I will email this to you, of course. Right fast. Number 4 is reference to the special use permit criteria for this type of special use permit, which has been characterized as a retail business not otherwise mentioned. So the requirement is that such business shall be reviewed for its ability to function without negative impacts, such as traffic and noise on neighboring properties. Off-street parking and loading requirements will be drawn from the most comparable retail activity for which standards have been established. Number 5. Part 13 of the specific conditions of the planning board resolution of approval for the initial Zero Place project states as follows. The number of approved off-street parking spaces shall control the number of businesses allowed in the building. No non-residential uses shall be allowed unless the parking requirements applicable to each individual use and all collective uses are met. Prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or use for any of the special uses approved and permitted herein, the building inspector shall determine that the parking requirements of individual use and all collective uses are met. Please have the applicant provide a survey of parking requirements based on the proposed and existing uses so that could be reviewed by the building inspector and determined if appropriate. The recently permitted coffee shop should be considered in this calculation and not as vacant space. So back at the time of the original approval, there was discussions about how parking was to be calculated in the future when new uses came to make sure that it's sufficient for what's there currently and what's proposed. Number 6, is there any signage that will be associated with this use? There is nothing in the plans. Please have the applicant provide a sign plan. Number 7, there is no business plan describing the operation of the business. Discussion should be had regarding items to be sold, times of operation, other general business information.
So can we make sure we have that next meeting?
Yeah. Go ahead and send us a copy of that.
I've got it.
Yeah, I definitely got it from you at some point. So.
It was forwarded to Ashley and John and me on the date of the last meeting, of the May 17th meeting. And it did not get addressed at the May 17th meeting, and the application has not been before the planning board since that May 17th meeting. Ashley's comments from her memo at that meeting were sent to the applicant, but I believe they addressed some of the building inspector's points too, but that's where the confusion is here. Sorry about that. We'll have it momentarily.
Okay, just so, there's lots to unpack there. It's gonna take more than just one meeting to unpack it all, go through it. But one thing that I would like to have and would almost insist on having is that traffic and parking are going to be an issue with your specific type of business. And this of course is germane to you guys as well. You know, I know that when we were on the board, we were talking about the zero place, and David said during the daytime, residents won't be there, so there'll be plenty of parking for retail. Probably not. But one thing that I have noticed, and I have to go to Rhode Island and Massachusetts for business fairly frequently. And one of the things that I have noticed is that dispensaries tend to have long car lines, long traffic lines, depending upon the day, weekend, of course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, weekdays, hours, evening, as opposed to during the noon hours. And that in some cases, those traffic lines, speaking with the people who are there, actually, the security guards and the traffic, they said those traffic lines can be up to a mile long. And they said they have a limited number of parking spaces because they're in an area where the accountant next door and the other, they're actually a bodega that's a little farther on. And one of them where they want to have their parking spaces, they want their customers to be able to come in and not to all be one dispensary. So that's going to present a challenge. So I need you guys to figure that out. And what I'd like to figure out, if you could, is a traffic management plan. And we should probably get our consultant to look at that too, because we don't want the traffic to go into the Huguenot Street neighborhoods. We have that issue with Ronnie to not have trucks going down that area. We don't want that to happen with this as well. We also, I'm concerned about on State Road, that if we have traffic going out on 32 North, kind of problem. And I don't know whether that means that we need to get village police to look at it, the county sheriff's office to look at the traffic management plan, or whether the state cops would want to get involved. Because if we have traffic that's a mile long on 32, plus coming into the village as well, trying to turn left and go in, we could have a real problem. So we need to address that ahead of time rather than after it's occurred. That seems.
Yeah, it's interesting to have heard that story from other people. All the ones I've seen, like park lot, there must be like different strategies on how customers are dealt with. But we'll certainly figure out how this works.
I think it's a reasonable concern. I think there should be some weight in those examples given to the population density that's occurring. Because it's absolutely valid concern, especially given where the building sits.
Yeah.
And close to that traffic light. Two, it's also benefit hopefully the more foot traffic than not. But no, absolutely, I think it's a valid concern. We can listen.
one of the places I look at was Fall River, Mass, and Fall River is not a big city, and it's not a wealthy area. So those people coming from outside the immediate area into that location, just off the highway. Another one was past Springfield, Mass, on the Mass Pike. I can't think of the name of the town. And I went through there and talked to them during the noon hour, and there was a lot there. Good 3 cars there. But they said that 5 o'clock on Friday, Saturday after 12 noon, all through the evening, and then Sunday afternoon. Those are their really busy periods of time. They said they have a real traffic problem at that time. So I'd like for us to get ahead of it.
And would it be, given it is not a New York State precedent yet for the traffic and parking requirement of business like this, would it be unprecedented to look into other state data in order to do the traffic study and the parking requirement study?
I think that would make the most sense, since there is nothing here to.
I agree with you, Stephen. I agree with you, John. It does draw a lot of driving traffic. I understand the concept of foot traffic. I don't even think there are places proven that foot traffic is going to be within there, and we need more closure and density in that district to make that real. So the traffic issue is significant. And I have seen where there's full parking lots and even valet, scenarios at dispensaries, because people just don't have a place to put their car, so they just hire people to drive it around until they go in the shop.
So a pickup.
Yeah.
To go order.
I think it really depends on how many of these dispensaries are getting approved in the area. Like in Massachusetts, up until very recently, there were very few in the state, and that's why there was so much demand. It's one of them. Good point. If New York starts suddenly approving them en masse, I doubt this location is going to get tons and tons of out of town traffic, but who knows, if it's one of the first, then yeah, it's a college. Right, and most of those people are probably going to be walking. You say that, but living in the neighborhood, a lot of that.
But anyway, I think that those are all good questions and good points, and I think that we need to find them out. So what I'd like to do is ask if we can get in touch with our consultant, Carlito Holt, so that we can begin to kind of model what we need to study. Not to just say, go off and study something that we can without any guidelines. But I think we need to get in touch with him and have him perhaps attend the next meeting, or he can call you guys and we can speak to us and talk about what our expectations are.
And if we recall correctly, the zero place parking is completely open to residential or commercial traffic. There's no designation or division of each as universal access.
Yeah.
And that argument about, less during the day and more through the night, I think that, we're not working that Friday really well.
Yeah.
We could probably go that into the study. Yeah, it could be a great use for a space there. Just
It's unique. This is the first one in the area, so we need to get it right first time rather than second.
ask another question about it in terms of the inspector and code enforcement. Is there any requirement that an applicant obtains a license to sell cannabis prior to a site approval, or is one contingent on the other?
So I'm not aware of anything that would require the license first, but any approval would, of course, be conditioned on that before getting a CO or anything like that. But I'll certainly look into that because it's new, so.
Personally, I don't. But we can supply that license, I'm sure.
Do you have the license or,
I'd have to.
okay,
Yeah, my
Licenses
father's
are
just
not
been
yet.
spearheading this, but out of respect to the board, I wanted to attend to that, so.
License is not. So.
yeah.
Okay, so that kind of covers traffic. Actually, we just move on to our next topic, which we need to delve into.
Parking is in connection with traffic. I think the other item, we discussed Corey's comments, which I'll get, that way they could all be addressed. You previously set a public hearing for this application, but that was not held because that meeting was canceled, I believe that's why.
Yeah.
But I don't know, since you are going to be requesting this additional traffic information, you obviously, I think, would want to have that available for the public to look at. So
Okay.
I don't know if you want to set that this evening, you want to hold off until you have that.
Study, information back.
And I guess, did you want your traffic consultant to give some, so typically the applicant would submit something that's been reviewed by your consultant, but did you want to have your consultant come up with a sort of scope or?
You know, just because this is unique, it's not like a drive-in theater or a more common retail use. So I don't know whether we want to have him wait for you to produce something that will validate or not validate and have other questions. It might be better, I don't know how we can do this, to have some sort of collaboration between the consultant and whoever you are using, you or whoever it is you're using, say, these are the concerns, how do we model this study? I don't think the attempt is to say no or to try to restrict. We just don't know. This is completely unique.
I think there's more data than we think, because they've been around, it's New York State, but they've been around for a decent amount of time in other states. So I have to talk to, I don't do traffic studies, but talk to our guys, and I have a feeling that there is some data out there they can use. I would suggest that our traffic consultant just call Carlito, and they talk traffic and try to come up with, what they think is the appropriate plan. And Carlito can report back to you guys. I think that's probably the most efficient way.
Yeah, I think so too. So Autumn, can you get in touch with Carlito, and if I need to speak with him to kind of describe what we're looking for? And that way then, once we have him securely on board, he can reach out to your traffic consultants and then hopefully come up with something that makes sense.
And so Mike, sorry.
I was just gonna make a note, did you set escrow on this? I don't have a note of having set escrow on this application, and we're moving into consultants, so do you want to set escrow on this application?
We will need to set escrow. What do we have? I don't know.
One through three, Flag Hill special use permit escrow was set at $500 at a previous meeting. That's what I have on file for a special use permit for other applications.
That's probably going to increase. To take care of the consultants, so,
Since you're bringing on traffic and there'll be a traffic study, I think, I don't think one recently that has brought on.
no, last one is.
Was for Manheim News, yeah, or, yeah, also.
2,500? Going back.
Certainly 500. 2,500 feels reasonable to me to get started.
So that way we can hopefully get it done within that time. And do that.
You could do a motion to set that initial escrow amount
right.
at $2,500.
Rachel, do you have any input on this? You haven't mentioned exclude you, just, you're muted. You're, okay, I think you're doing all right.
So,
We can hear you, Rachel.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, what part of this is in our hands anyhow? I mean, I don't know.
Sorry, repeat that?
I said, what part of this is in our hands? I mean,
Well, what we're trying to do is just to find out, what we're trying to get an idea of how to, we're talking through this, we're talking about getting a traffic study so we can determine what difficulties there may be related to traffic and, in this, if we call it new, we're just saying we feel that we have traffic
Okay.
study.
so we have to wait for that study anyhow, so wait for it.
Right. So 2,500 is what we're looking at doing. So you want to make a motion to, sorry.
Motion to set an initial escrow at $2,500.
So, motion to set the initial escrow at $2,500.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's taken care of.
I have a question that might go into the inquiry around the study is the assumption is that this is for recreational cannabis sale or medicinal or both?
Believe is this, and I don't want to give a false narrative, so. I get that
That's a good
information
point.
and
That
make
would
sure
definitely
I can-
impact the
Yeah.
traffic. I think.
Given the
Account
size
for
of
a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Given the size of the store, given the licenses that they're talking about, I would say it's recreational.
That would be a big difference to me.
Okay, what else can you do? Work through all this.
I believe that's it.
Okay.
Board doesn't have anything else.
There was that description of the operations that was raised. I think that's a good one to get into a little bit. That could affect traffic and parking, like for example, facility where people are welcome to stay, lounge, which is possible in the law versus a dispensary which only can sell but not allow consumption on site.
And I think,
Consumption on site would need feel more like a Starbucks, people parking and staying versus.
and
driving through.
that's important because I don't know that that's because the use that it's under right now is retail, not otherwise mentioned. So if there was going to be a non-retail component, that would have to, one, make sure that it's something that is allowed there, and then two, address those other impacts as well.
I think that they have talked about some of this stuff in previous solutions. Say, it's non-smoking place, so there's no lounge. Yeah. And it talks about number of people to expect. Yes, yeah, that was part of the. Number one there, formal concept. So is that.
I believe that is. Okay. All right, guys, you got your charge. We'll have probably it'll reach out to me, then we'll go ahead and speak to you. Probably you specifically as you were having a lot of this. So there we go.
Okay, and then Corey's memo.
I forwarded it.
Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so finally we are coming down to our last item, the special use permit, commercial retail other grocery PB 2209 Chestnut West Commons. Tell us what you're going to do.
A refillery, have you ever heard of that term?
I have not, and from all I've heard is unique in the sense that it is not a grocery store, it is not a bodega, it is not a bulk food store, it's something that.
It's kind of a bulk food store, but it's not just food. So it's anything that I can offer in bulk where you can bring your own container and refill it. So that's where the term refillery comes. So the idea is to eliminate as much plastic in your life as possible. So you're constantly buying a new container of laundry detergent or dishwashing detergent in a plastic bottle. And then of course they have other options out there now, like pods and sheets and things like that. But for people who still want liquid, but don't want the plastic, I will offer it in bulk. So they bring their own container and they refill it. They empty it at home, they bring it back, they keep refilling it over and over again, because plastic can last 1,000 years or more. So the idea is just to keep reusing it over and over and over again. So the three large components will be pantry items such as dried food, dried fruit, nuts, seeds, flowers, things like that. Bring your own container and refill. The second component would be personal care items. So shampoos and conditioners, soaps that don't come in plastic wrap, toothpaste tablets instead of in a tube, bamboo toothbrushes, deodorant in a container that you refill, you scoop it out of a large container and you refill it. So those type of items. Mouthwash tablets instead of mouthwash in plastic bottles. Then the third component is home goods. That would include your laundry soap, your dishwashing soap, your hand dishwashing soap. It could possibly include pet items, dog treats that don't come in plastic, or upcycled dog toys made from recycled goods or things like that. Brushes, scrub brushes that aren't made from plastic, they're made from bamboo and natural fibers that can be composted when they're done with their life instead of discarded and not recycled, because most of those things can't be recycled. Those type of things. Compost containers that sit on the counter, anything to encourage eco-friendly living. So those are the three most important focused items. And then just for fun, because I'm kind of where you can have walk-in people off the rail trail or some tourism, you know, especially during the peak season. Just some upcycled items, like maybe some candles that have been recycled and you know, in old beer cans or in old wine glass, you know, wine bottles that have been cut and they're made into candles, or earrings that are made from soda cans, or bowls and dishes that are made from old record albums that have been melted into a bowl and into a planter, those type of things. But that'll be the minimal items. They won't be refilled. They will just be like upcycled and eco-friendly gift items. And greeting cards as well, like recycled greeting cards, and maybe some logo gear. Oh, the other component is also reusable containers, like for takeout. If you go to a restaurant and want to bring a metal container to take your leftovers home, you can't finish it, so you don't have to get a takeout container from the restaurant. Or if you order takeout over the phone, you tell them, I'm bringing my container, can you wait till I get there and I give you my container, and they put it in that. So it reduces waste within, you know, the town and restaurant, things like that. And then right on the rail trail, so water bottles, you know, with logos on them, but really good high quality ones. Bottles that you put in your bike, you know, when you're riding to keep the water or whatever in. Yeah, maybe plastic, but mostly focused on non-plastic items. So mostly metal containers and bottles and coffee travel mugs and things like that.
There are local examples. There's the Ozone up in Red Hook. There's a store right on Tinker Street in Woodstock. There's one in Beacon. All small shops similar to what
There's
we're
a
trying
tiny
to
one in
establish.
Kingston as well.
Yeah.
And some of them combine food and non-food, and some of them just do non-food. So there's a blend.
Yeah,
And they're popping up all over the country, and really globally, they're getting really big.
Recently saw one in Brooklyn that's really good model.
Yeah. And
again, all scaled in the same size of kind of square footage and store space.
Yeah, mine would be very small, like, you know,
But I'm trying to keep the prices low. It's only 776 square foot. It's the smallest space that they offer there. And actually wasn't told that I had to get a special use permit, and I already signed the lease, so some kind of stuff.
Well, we'll be fairly easy on here.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna classify this as a type 2 action under superior action recommendation. We'll schedule a public hearing. She will tell you about how to conduct a special use permit, and it's fairly easy.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of get going here and see how quickly we can go. Again, parking is going to be an issue. As you've heard.
Yeah, as far as that goes, I've been frequenting there a lot during the day because I'm going there to do measurements and meet contractors just to get quotes and things. And there's been on average at least 10 spaces in the lot that are open, and an additional 5 on the street, 5 out of the 7 that are on the road there. So that's 15. And then I just got an email from the property manager last week. She's instructing all of the residents to park in the EV charging stations. All of them except for the 2 right up front by the front door.
Right.
So that's an extra 10 spaces right there, and they're always empty. Always. So there's like 20 spaces there during the day. So like I usually go during the day, so I don't know what it's like on the evening. But most shoppers will probably only come in for maybe 15-20 minutes.
Right.
I don't know, depending on, how many items they're getting, but I plan on having the metal hand carts that you carry around the store, not any shopping carts that have wheels that you push out into the parking lot, none of that. So, if they want to carry the metal cart out and bring it back, they can, but most people will just bring their own reusable shopping bags.
Right. Any questions that we need to, that you want to ask anybody? No?
Will you have things like molasses and tahini?
I hope so. I'll have maple syrup and honey in bulk. No one's asked me about molasses yet, so I'll have to consider that if I can get it in bulk. But yeah, I'll definitely have some liquids. I'll have one small refrigerator with tofu in bulk because we eat a lot of tofu in my family and I can't stand the plastic packaging. For the most part, can't be recycled. So I'm gonna get tofu in 5-gallon buckets and have it in the refrigerator. So it won't be in, other than the bucket, which is returnable to the manufacturer of that tofu, which is in the Finger Lakes region. There'll be no waste.
Again, that was modeled at the Brooklyn store as well.
Yes, yeah, Brooklyn store as
Successfully,
well.
so.
We'll have some fresh fruits and vegetables as well. For the people that live there, they can just come down, have the convenience of grabbing some fresh fruits and vegetables. We'll have toilet paper that's not made with trees. It's made with either bamboo or hemp. We'll have just some basic everyday products that'll be very convenient for the people living there to come down and grab.
It sounds like depending on the location, near a place, there will be a need for delivery, both delivery, truck delivery, things like that.
Right, they can just park right out front because it's literally right facing 32.
Remember how that figures in, is there a place plan, but that would be something to be prepared to talk through.
Right.
Yeah, from what I remember, the delivery was going to be on 32. The trucks were going to be on 32. They were not going to turn to the right and head down, and there was no real allowances made for them turning into the parking lot because of the corner. So from what I understand, it's going to be on 32.
Yeah, the property manager told me specifically that any deliveries had to go through my front door, which is facing 32, not through the hallway back entrance into my shop. And it'll probably only be once a week at the most. Because I'll have distributors that, it's like a $500 minimum for a distributor. So
I'm not gonna get that. I mean, it's a tiny shop. I'm not gonna get that much inventory every week, so. There'll be storage, a small storage area in the back of my shop. And if you look at the layout at all, it's only about 100, it'll be about 100 square feet, but it'll be like big shelves going up. And then a completely separate area behind the counter, so be completely away from any consumers.
And signage and lighting and typical stuff, all that will.
Yeah, no, it's very basic, just shelves. A lot of stuff will be on wheels. We can move it around, a lot of pieces of furniture. My husband's gonna custom build some of them for me, and we can, move them around depending on how the flow works best with when you have to weigh your empty containers and fill it up and then bring them up to the counter to have them checked out. So
Drop ceiling, electrical, HVAC are the key components.
we also have
that
a
are structural,
3-compartment sink.
And with lighting being part of electrical, and drop ceiling, and there's a 3.
What does one
The
sink?
lighting that we're gonna be most concerned about is like exterior sign and that type of lighting. That's gonna be our interior. Probably taken care of by other parts of the building department.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the sign yet.
Yeah.
We were told that I kind of have to follow Noah Michael's lead, what he did with the cafe, but just scale it down to my small size.
By the building owners request.
Can you submit a proposed sign plan for the board to look at with that? Because I think and I'm trying to recall too, if there was.
Is there a maximum aggregate sign square footage for all of them?
I need to look at how that, and I believe there was some type of almost a master sign plan to kind of get an idea of what each, whether it was by size or how everything would kind of fit together. So we could take a look at that, and perhaps the building inspector can weigh in on that as well, as far as any requirements from Zero Place, but this board would want to see typically the sign.
So that could potentially be more restrictive than just some ordinance.
Because of exactly when it was approved.
What's that?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What's the name of the business?
Second Nature.
Second Nature, cool.
We want everybody to get into the habit of reusing. So we want it to become second nature, to save and refill and save and refill.
Okay, so you have the information. So what we're gonna do is, I'd like to get a motion to classify this as a type 2 action under seeker.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So we do have that now classified as type 2 action.
What does that mean exactly?
So that's the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So certain types of, anytime this board's approving something, it has to look and see what type of category it falls under. So type 2 actions are considered exempt from environmental review under the statute. So because you are, you fit one of those categories because you're reusing an existing space, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they've already gone through their whole legal process.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Then we want to schedule a public hearing. So Autumn, what is as soon as we can get a public hearing? And she's going to give you the date of the public hearing. And you'll need to reach out to her. There's some requirements of sending out notices to.
Yeah, we've already talked about it.
Great. If you can take care of that,
Yeah.
that'll be very helpful.
It might make sense to do the following one. I mean, I
Yeah, so then it would be the second.
I mean, if you're willing to do it, I'm willing to do the 19th because that's 2 weeks away and we only need 10 days notice, so I can get the letters out like within the next 2 days.
I can get you the documentation.
Yeah, because it
It's
works.
not a very big list because most of the people that live there are rental properties, and Autumn has told me that I don't have to mail to the rentals, only to the property owners.
Right.
So there's not a very big list.
With, so.
So you want to set for July 19th?
Yeah, so, let's do a motion then to set the public hearing for July 19th.
So moved.
And a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we, have you set in for that public hearing? We reach out to Autumn, get that taken care of. As far as a narrative for special use permits, actually, what can you refer them to so that they can better understand what's necessary for the narrative?
Sure, and I'm trying to see if they had already submitted. They may have already addressed it.
I submitted the 5 questions that you had to write out on a separate sheet of paper, and I also submitted a business plan.
Oh, okay. Are you there?
And I also submitted a floor plan.
Perfect. It'll all come out in the packet that we get at our next meeting.
So you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, then?
No.
I think I saw the business plan.
It's all one file.
The
Probably
special
part of the
permit, yeah.
confusion, it's all.
All right, so Autumn will have that, to get that out to us, and then that should make it very easy for you that, pretty soon as you see some of those, we like, we like
So the building inspector typically does a zoning code review and then he would identify any other issues. So we don't have that now. So just know that if anything comes up from that, that'll be shared with you as well. But I think really the main thing would be the sign.
Yeah.
You could submit something. I'm looking now at there was for Net Zero, there was a sign plan. And it looks like it was showing signs that were 10 square feet for each.
Kathy's was 30,
for each
but
retail.
this is
So-
a much larger space. I got the formula, so
Okay.
I was given yeah, and I know that's a different permit, so that won't hold me up for getting
No.
a special use permit. That's a whole different permit to get the
Right.
sign permit. You just are curious, but
Well,
it won't hold me
Well,
up.
Well, you'll submit the sign to us, your
Yeah, because
plan
you will
for the sign.
you do require the signs to come to you,
Right,
to review. So it should be coming to this
yeah,
board.
and we'll look at it and then, say yes, no.
Right, but one's not contingent on the other, so that's what I'm asking.
What is not contingent on?
It's all part of the same.
Yeah, it's all one,
Is it- Oh, it is?
it's all one
It
seamless
is.
process.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, I wasn't told that before, okay. Okay, so I have to have the sign done in order to get the special use permit. The sign
Well,
permit.
Or it's something that part of your planning board application, it's something that the planning board would need to review and then
Okay,
sign off on. So certain times there are, it could be just a sign permit on its own.
yeah.
But
that's what I'm-
when you're already before the planning board, then
Oh,
it's
so
within
just do it
the
all at one
planning
time.
board.
Oh,
to-
okay,
Yeah.
now I got it. I was just gonna do that later. Okay, but just get it all done. Okay.
All done,
Okay.
one hit.
I just, but the building permits are held up until I get the special use permit. So I don't want to hold up the building
Right.
permit any longer. I don't want the sign permit to hold up the special use permit that holds up
You
the
get the
building
sign,
permit.
you get this, your sign thing quick.
Yeah,
That's the plan.
they're all tied together. Yeah,
Okay,
do it all. And
okay.
then it will be done.
Very good.
I already have a sign. It's already made, but
Perfect.
it's from another, yeah, so I have to talk to the property manager and Willie and see if I can use it or not. No, it's a very simple sign.
Anything else on this section? We're all good with this? Okay.
I think we're all good.
All right, so you got your assignment, reach out to Autumn, tomorrow she'll be able to give you full details about what you're gonna need to do.
Okay.
You'll get also get information about the special use permit, the narrative, sign, all those things that you're gonna need to submit to us, and, then when you're back next week, we'll be able to push through it, relatively quickly, we'll probably get you up higher in the, in the rank, so. It's nice to be able to get some things done relatively quickly, so.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. have a good evening.
Sorry to keep you
Thanks for
so
your
late
patience.
tonight.
No, we were late because of me.
I know I was a late comer to the agenda, so like I said, they kind of surprised me. I thought my store was a specialty store, it was one of the pre-approved uses, and no one ever told me that it wasn't. But according to Corey, it's a grocery store because of the variety that I'm offering. So that's why I have to do this.
Yeah. Well,
The cafe didn't have to do it.
Yeah, we'll be quick with you.
Okay,
Don't worry.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Autumn, are there any other people that may be waiting for public comments?
Not appear to be,
We're gonna approve those minutes. Rachel, you're here, so, we need to look at the minutes. Did you get a chance to look at them?
Yes, I did, and yes, they're good.
Okay. So, need a motion to approve the minutes from our, last meeting, which was in June, on June 10th? June 7th,
So
sorry, June 7th, 22. So I need a
So-
motion to approve those. You get approve those second, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
So those minutes are approved. With that, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
We all moved.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's get us off of live air there. Yeah. I'll take care of it.